Hi all, welcome to my channel. I'm Alex Hubbard. I'm a senior system administrator and cybersecurity engineer. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing below. If you've been here before, welcome back. Be sure to check out my Instagram and Facebook pages for more details and content. I'll put links to those in the description. I'm going to show you how to configure Microsoft Intune and Autopilot. We'll go over how to capture your hardware IDs, base policies and groups, and I'll show you what a full setup looks like. If you've never used Intune and Autopilot before, you'll want to check them out. As a small business system administrator, they're going to make your life so much easier when it comes to imaging, deploying new or repurposing systems. As always, I'll have a full write-up over on my blog site, achubbard.com. What licenses do you need to implement Microsoft's Autopilot and Intune? Microsoft has a multitude of options when it comes to picking out licenses to make these two functions work. I'll leave a link to the requirements in the article and video description. For this tutorial, I am leveraging my Microsoft 365 Business Premium license. This is the bare minimum, most simple license solution to get this to work for your organization. The current cost as of this video and article is around $22 per user per month. You can see where this would add up quickly, but your return on investment, especially if you're a one-man band, one or two small business IT admin department or IT department, it's going to save you a lot of time. The more advanced licenses cost even more. It should also be noted that you will need Windows 11 Pro or Windows 10 Pro to join an Azure AD domain. Keep that in mind as you're building out your fleet. I've seen many small businesses over the years run down to the local big box store and grab whatever they had on the shelf and then wonder why it doesn't work or won't join the domain. Your best bet for this setup is to work with a value-added reseller or VAR or an OEM like a Dell or an HP to get your environment configured so you don't need to perform the manual hardware ID capture steps that I'm going to show you in this video. Getting Microsoft 365 configured for Autopilot and Intune is not terribly complicated. Make sure you have the right licenses prior to starting, as we discussed earlier in the video. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to build out our group. This is what we assign our systems to. So you'll want to log into your admin portal and open up Endpoint Manager. Once you do that, you're going to click on Groups over here in the left-hand column. And we can create a new group. And we are going to call it Autopilot Lab. And make sure you give your group a description. I harp on this in a lot of my videos. Give your stuff descriptions, put notes in there. It's going to help you as a system administrator when you come back 6 months from now and say, what was I doing? Or if you move on, it's going to help the next tech be able to understand what's going on in the environment. So definitely encourage putting notes and descriptions wherever possible. So we'll put in this group is going to hold all of the systems in our Autopilot lab. And you can leave, for now, we're going to leave it as assigned. You can get into dynamic and different things later on down the road, but for the moment, we're going to leave it as the membership type is assigned, and we'll go ahead and create our group here. Now, it may take a minute for this to populate in the list, so you can click refresh, and you should see shortly a group that says Autopilot Lab. Once that comes up, then we can continue. Go ahead and refresh your screen here, and there we go. There's our new group, Autopilot Lab. Now we've got to move on to the Autopilot profile. This is kind of how the magic happens. So from Endpoint Manager, we want to go to Devices, and we'll want to click on Enroll Devices under the Device Enrollment header. You're going to click the Deployment Profile. Now we want to create a profile, so click this Create Profile button and click Windows PC. And again, we're going to call it Autopilot Lab Profile. Again, give it a description. So we'll do this profile is being used for the Autopilot lab and contains all the needed settings to test with. We do not want to convert all targeted devices to Autopilot. This will convert everything in your environment. So since this is a lab, we are going to select no, which is the default. Go ahead and click next. Now we need to configure how we want the device to handle the out-of-box experience. This is what the end user will see. For deployment mode, we are going to select user-driven. We want the system to join the domain, so make sure you select Azure AD joined. We can hide the license and privacy terms. We'll also hide the option to change accounts. Since this is being configured to be deployed to a theoretical user, we're going to set the account type to standard. We don't want users to have local admin access. Depending on your environment, you may wish to pre-provision or to allow pre-provision deployment. This would allow you to bypass any user authentication during deployment. User-related settings and applications would be pulled down later. This might be helpful if you as the admin were setting the system up, but perhaps didn't have a user to assign to it just yet. We'll leave the language to pick the operating system default and automatically configure the keyboard. Finally, we want the system to be named so that we can identify it. You'll want to enter your company name and then the %serial % variable. So we can click yes on this last question here. So you can come down and type in lab dash %serial %. And what that will do is that will append, every machine will have lab dash, and then it will append the serial number of the system to the name of the machine. So we can pretty much leave the rest of this default, and you can go ahead and click next. Here we're going to assign the profile to the group we created in the previous step. So go ahead and click the Add Groups button, and we're going to find our Autopilot Lab group. Click that, click Select, and now we've just selected the group that this policy or profile will be assigned to. So you can finally click Next, and you can review your changes here and make sure that everything is set accordingly to the way that you want it. Once you're okay with that, you can click the Create button. Now we have our profile here. All right, now we get our profile, our group dialed in. Let's spice things up a little bit. Let's say you want the full package to go out to your employee, your user. But let's say we want to make sure Chrome and the Microsoft Office 365 desktop applications get installed, right? So how do you go about handling those without touching the system? Well, first off, it's pretty simple. Chrome is not natively built into this. I'm going to show you how I do it. There may be better ways to do it, but it's not super complicated. First off, deploying Chrome this way, Chrome can get stagnant. You should really be running some kind of patch management solution in your environment. You'll want to come in and update this MSI fairly regularly. You'll need to download Chrome from Google's webpage, the Enterprise MSI install, and I'll put the link in the article and in the video description. So you come over here to Google's webpage and download the MSI. You'll then want to unzip it and remember where you extracted it to. So we will click download. We're going to accept the download. It's going to download it. We're going to extract it. And then back in your 365 Endpoint Manager Admin Center, we're going to click on Apps, and we're going to come over to by platform since we're only concentrating on Windows for this particular video. From your apps screen here, we're going to click on Add, and we're going to select an app. For Chrome, we will want to select a line of business app. This will allow you to upload an MSI or other various applications. So go ahead and make sure that drop down is set to line of business and click select. So select an app package file, And this is where we're going to have to come to our downloads folder, and we're going to extract our Google Chrome. So we're going to do extract all. It's going to extract it. Give it a second here. Now we've got this folder, and we want the installer folder. So this is the MSI that we're going to upload to the 365 portal. Jumping back over to our portal here, we're going to select our file. So we'll come into this folder in downloads, installers, and we're going to upload our Google Chrome MSI. Click OK. This is where it gets stagnant because you're uploading an MSI, it's not changing. I don't particularly like this way of doing it from a security standpoint, but this is the way it works within 365. There may be better ways to do it. You can also deploy Chrome with other tools, but this is how you would do it if you were going to hand this off to a user without trying to touch it at all. And you can do this for other various business apps as long as you have an MSI. So it is a neat feature. Like I said, it can get stagnant from a security standpoint because if you're continuing to deploy a legacy version of Chrome, you'll want to come in here and update this periodically and make sure you have some kind of patch management solution in your environment. So now that we have our file uploaded here, we'll just leave it as Google Chrome. We enter the publisher, which is obviously Google. And you can pretty much leave the rest as the default for this particular application. Go ahead and click Next. And we are going to, again, assign a group to it. So we're going to click on Add Group. We're going to come to our Autopilot Lab, and we're going to click Select. And so what this will do is 365 will detect that your system is in this specific group. It knows it's supposed to get Chrome, and it's going to push Chrome down to it when your user logs in. So we can go ahead and click Next. Again, it's going to ask you to review your settings, and you can do that. And once you are satisfied with that, click the Create button. And so now we have just deployed our Chrome application. Doing this again, we'll do this process again for 365, Microsoft 365's desktop apps, so Word, Excel, that sort of thing. And the process is similar with the exception of the drop-down in the beginning that you need to select. All right, above or earlier in this tutorial, this video, we created a task to deploy Chrome. Let's say we want to deploy the Office desktop applications to our newly enrolled systems. How do we do that? This is even easier as there's nothing to download. It's built into 365. So we'll follow the same process as above, or that we took earlier with Chrome, except that in the Apps section, we are going to pick Microsoft 365 applications, Windows 7 and later. So again, go back to Apps, and we're going to click on the Windows platform. We're going to click the Add button, and this time in this dropdown, the app type that we're going to select is Microsoft 365 Apps, Windows 10 and later. So click that, click Select. We can leave these as the default. Click your Next button, and it will allow you to, we'll leave the configuration settings format as the default. It will allow you to select what applications you want to install. I'll leave the default there as well just for this demo so you can see it. We're going to use 64-bit. And your update channel, if you don't want to aggravate your users with constant updates to features and GUI changes within 365, we will do, or I will typically pick like the semi-annual enterprise channel so that it's not getting, you're not making changes to the users quite so often. The other option that we'll want to check is this Use Shared Computer Activation setting. Since we're going to be deploying this to a specific dedicated user, we're going to leave that as no. If you were deploying this to, say, like a conference room or shared PC, we'd want to set that to yes. So you may have to create a different policy for your shared computers. This is the way Microsoft handles activations. So we'll click Next, and then this process is exactly similar to Chrome, or identical to Chrome. We'll click the Add Group. We're going to find our Autopilot lab. We're going to select it, and we're going to click Next, and we're going to review our settings and click Create. So now we've just deployed 2 applications to our Autopilot lab group. So when we finally assign a computer to it and log in for the first time, it's going to pull down Chrome, and it's going to pull down the Office 365 desktop applications. The next piece that we're going to cover is company branding. Company branding is very important to Autopilot and Intune in that feature set. This is what your end user is going to see when they log in, whether it be to the system itself or to your 365 portal. So we definitely want to take a look at that and get that configured, at least so they have some idea of what they're logging into. So if you're if you're setting this up for a business, you'll want to work with your marketing or graphics team to get your logo and a background. I'm not a graphics guy, but I can show you where this stuff lives so that at least you can set it once you have that information. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to come back to our Azure AD, our Microsoft 365 Admin Center here, and we want to click on Azure Active Directory. And again, from there, we'll click on Azure Active Directory. And we're going to come down to Company Branding. We're going to click this default policy here. And this is where you are going to put in all your logos and your hints and that type of stuff. I've already kind of configured it with my test background image. But again, I'm not a graphics guy. So this is just where it lives. And this is where you can play with those settings and make sure you have it set up so that you can, so it looks professional. Now that we've got our graphic settings out of the way, we need to look at our mobility settings. So we'll come up to Mobility, MDM, and MAM. And this is what's going to tell Autopilot to use Intune, or Intune to use Autopilot, etc. It's what ties the two of them together. So we'll want to click on Microsoft Intune. And we're going to set the scope to all on both of them. If you were just this is my lab environment, so for me, it's fine. I'm going to set it to all. But if you were just doing some testing, you may want to just set it to some. So we'll leave the links as the default. We're not going to change any of that. We're just going to make sure these settings are either some or all. This is the tedious part in this configuration. This is the endpoint configuration part. These are the steps that we need to perform to capture the system's hardware ID. As I spoke about in the beginning of the video, if you were to purchase a system from an OEM vendor like Dell or HP, or a VAR like a CDW or a Connection, they should be able to capture this information prior to shipping. Now, you'll have to set this up with them and give them access to your 365 tenant. But that way, you can go on their webpage, order a system, send it directly to your employee, and as soon as your employee logs in with your email address, they're going to say, hey, this belongs to company ABC, and they're going to start pulling down your profiles as soon as they get an internet connection and log in. So this is a great way to automate your laptop, desktop hardware deployment to your end users. So that's one way to do it. But let's say you're a small IT shop. Maybe you don't have a VAR or a relationship with an OEM for whatever reason. You can still leverage Microsoft's Intune and Autopilot. To start, we'll need to capture the hardware ID and add it to the Microsoft 365 admin portal so that Microsoft knows that this system belongs to you. On your VM, and I should mention that I'm using a virtual machine for this tutorial. This process is the same whether you're using a physical system, virtual machine, what have you. You want to open up your PowerShell or Windows Terminal as an admin. I'm using Windows 11, so we'll click yes. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a directory to save our hardware ID output file to. This can be any directory, but I get in the habit of creating an updates folder in the root of C. Some people call it a temp. temp folder. You know, you can call it really whatever you want. I call it updates. It's my personal preference. That's what I was taught early on in my career. It's what I can use to move files to and from the system, and I can call that directory using tools like PDQ and other various scripts, etc. So first thing that we need to do, coming back over to our virtual machine, we need to do a cd into c:, and then we're going to type the command mkdir updates. And what this is going to do is it's going to create the directory in the root of C called updates. There we go. So now if we do a dir or directory command, you can see there that we have a folder called updates. Additionally, you can also open up Windows Explorer here and go to the root of C, and you'll see, oops, I double clicked that. That's not what I wanted to do. You'll see the updates folder. So now we can go into back into PowerShell. We're going to type in set location as C updates. It's just a fancy way of changing directory, basically. Next, we need to set our execution policy. And the execution policy is what's going to let the script that we're about to run. So we're going to type in the command here. It's going to be set execution policy. And I'll put all these in the write-up. And it's going to be scope process. And what this means is we're only setting the execution policy to unrestricted during this process. So once you close out of PowerShell, it's going to go back to the default. So we're going to do execution policy, unrestricted, and we're going to use the force switch. And what that does is it suppresses any prompts that come from running this command. So there's no like, are you sure you want to allow this type prompts? So we're going to set that. And then the final step before we can run our script is to actually get the script and install it and get it. So we'll type in install script. And it's going to be -name get Windows Autopilot info --force. Now here it's going to prompt you, do you want to install, or the NuGet provider is required to continue. NuGet is the package manager for .NET, so we do need to install that, so we can hit Y for yes. And it's going to download it and install the script. You can see that the script is finished downloading. Now we need to run it to actually get our hardware ID. So to run it, we're going to do get-windows, and the tab key is your friend here. So it's get-windows autopilot info.ps1, and then we need to use the switch output file. And this is what this is how it's going to know what to name the output file from running this. And it's going to save it in C updates. So I typically will give it the name of the machine. So lab-win11a.csv, and you're going to run it. It's going to generate the serial number here. And again, this is a virtual machine, so it's kind of going to look weird. Normally, if you were using like a Dell or HP, it would look like their traditional serial number. So if we go into our C updates folder, you can see that this CSV has been generated. So now the final step is to get this into Office 365 so that Microsoft understands that this serial number, this system belongs to your tenant. And when you go to provision it, it knows when your user that's associated with the tenant as well logs in, it's going to start pulling those profiles down. One additional thing that I should mention, going back to our lab machine here, is getting this CSV. You know, if you're doing this in a lab, how do you get this? How do you get this file off of this lab system and into 365? Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. You could log into your portal through the lab machine itself and upload it there. You could put it to a network share and then upload it from your admin workstation. There's many different ways you can do it. I'll leave that kind of up to you of how you're going to get it into your into 365. For this tutorial, I'm going to just copy it to my admin workstation and upload it through the portal because that's the quickest, easiest route for me. From our Endpoint Manager Admin Center, we want to click on Devices, and we're going to click on Enroll Devices. Underneath Windows Autopilot Deployment Program, we're going to click on the Devices button here, and we're going to come up to the Import button. We'll click Select a File. We've got our file here. It's going to tell you it's formatted correctly or incorrectly based on how you exported it. If you use the script that I just showed you, it should always tell you it's formatted correctly. So we'll point it at our file and we'll click Import. And note that this does take a few minutes to show up in your devices list here. Once it shows up here, we can then go back to our group and assign this system that we just uploaded to the group. So now you can see it's been uploaded successfully. We can close our notification portal or notification menu there and click refresh again. And now we see our system. So this is the one that says it's not assigned. This is our new system here. Let's go back to our Endpoint Manager and click on Groups, or in this left-hand column here, click on Groups, and we'll find our Autopilot Lab group that we created previously. We're going to click Members. We want to add a member, so click this Add Member button here at the top. And now we need to find our latest system. So we can look at the serial number here, and we can start to type in VMware. Yep. And so the last four of it are C178, which is the serial number here. So that's kind of how I match it up. You can do it, however you like. We'll click the system, we'll click Select, and now if you hit refresh, and again, this is my one caveat that I don't like about, or one complaint that I don't like about this, is it's not always the fastest to sync up when you make a change. Not really sure why, but that's something that I've noticed, so don't be too alarmed if you run through this and you're saying, hey, it's not showing up, it's not showing up. Give it a few minutes. It takes a little while. All right, let's try this again. There we go. So now we can see this device is in our Autopilot Lab group and is a member of this group. Let's go back over to our lab system here, and we need to reset it. So this is Windows 11 that I'm using, and to do that, we will come down to our Start menu here and go to Settings. And we're going to find the Recovery button under System. We're going to click Recovery. We're going to reset this PC. And we want to remove everything. This takes a minute or two. We're going to do a local reinstall. If you do cloud, depending on your internet connection, it could be a lot slower. So we'll do a local reinstall. These are the settings that you've chosen through this wizard. We'll click Next. And it's going to start to reset the computer. Actually, it's going to come up and make sure you're cool with the settings that you chose. So basically one more confirmation. We'll click Reset. And there we go. So it's going to run its reset procedure, and it's going to reboot. Upon rebooting, this is where we'll log in with our tenant email address, etc. So the next step is what it's going to look like for your user. The process for resetting, I've included both Windows 11 and Windows 10. They're very, very similar, but there's a couple of different nuances in the beginning of just where the reset button is located. Process looks pretty much the same going through the deployment phase. So once this resets, we'll come back and I'll run through the login and what your user is going to see and what that looks like. Now we've reset our lab computer here. So we're going to log in with our email account that's assigned to our tenant. We're going to put in our password. And it's going to prompt you to verify your identity. So we'll do a text message. Can enter our code. Now this is going to start pulling down all of the applications, the settings, etc. that we configured earlier on in the video. So notice you won't see any of the out-of-box experience or any of the privacy settings or anything like that you would normally notice or go through when you set up a computer for the first time. So your end user is not going to have to do any of that. This is going to automate all of it. Once this comes back, or once this finishes up, it'll take us to the desktop, and I will show you that Chrome and Office 365, the desktop apps, are installed. One more thing I forgot to include is it's going to ask if your environment's configured to use a PIN. Mine is, and I believe it is out of the box. It's going to ask you to set up a PIN. So we can click OK. And this is what your user will use to log in place of their password. So we can do our PIN. Mine is configured for six digits. You may want to adjust that based on your site security controls. Click OK. And you're good to go there. And now you're at the desktop. So notice that Chrome is not there yet, and I'm going to guess that 365 is not there quite yet either. Let me see. These do take a few minutes to pull down. Yeah, they haven't pulled down quite yet. Yeah, so they're not installed yet, but it is working on it. We'll come back in a minute, and you should start. You can see this. Used to be the hourglass. It's not, but the circle there. So it is actively pulling down the applications from 365. Well, I hope this video has helped you. Autopilot is something that I have really looked forward to configuring for a long time. I've never had the opportunity to do so, so I decided what better place to learn but in the lab. So it's not really daunting to set up at all. It's very easy. It's going to save you a ton of time if you are a solo admin or a small IT shop within a business. It's just literally going to save you a ton of time. So if you can convince your management to get you the licenses that you need, your ROI is going to be huge, because you're not going to have to, especially if you're integrated with an OEM or a VAR, you're not going to have to touch these endpoints when you deploy them out to your users. I've worked in environments before where we have multiple geographically different offices, and the process was we order a laptop, it shows up at the main office, myself or my tech images it, and then it goes back out to the user. So you're paying for multiple shipping labels, you're paying for the text time, you're paying for your time. There's a lot of involvement in it. This streamlines the process so much. And while I'm actually shooting this, Chrome has just popped into the window over here, so you can see that it has installed, and we'll check that out in a second. It just streamlines your imaging process so much, and it really helps keep things flowing, and it makes things easier for the user. It makes things easier for you. So very much encourage you to take a look at it and get this set up for your organization. So while I was shooting my ending before this all finished, you can see that Chrome, or while I was waiting for this to install, you can see that Chrome is installed, and we've opened it here. And we should be able to go and search for, let's take a look and see if we can find Word or Excel. See if those are installed yet. Again, it's not sometimes it's not super fast, but Chrome is there. And let's see. Oh, there we go, right there. It just popped in. Right there, Word. So we'll open up Word, And there you go. You have just deployed Chrome and the Office suite to your user's workstation without having to lift a finger. So you can do this for pretty much any other application that I can think of off the top of my head, as long as you have an MSI for it. So if you found this video helpful, hopefully you did, please give it a thumbs up below. Any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I'll have my full write-up over at my blog site, achubbard.com. And you can also check out my social media pages, Instagram and Facebook. I will put the links in the description as well. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up below and consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.